I'm 21 years old, certifiably Gen Z. So naturally, I worry. I worry about my future, and I worry about the future of the world around me. And I'm positive I'm not the only one.
2023, the hottest year on record.
Glaciers shrinking at a dramatic pace.
Jakarta is literally sinking.
Wildfires across Europe.
British Columbia.
East Texas.
The political pledge to end deforestation, well, it went off track.
Now, I don't have a big solution to any of that, obviously, but I want to share something that's kind of helped me to keep the existential dread at bay. At the start of last year, I set out to make 12 short documentaries about various earthy topics: forests, glaciers, volcanoes. That pursuit brought me much closer to issues that for years I had only read about: climate change, extreme weather, natural disasters. And it took me to some of the most incredible places I've ever experienced. To some of the last places to escape noise pollution in the US and find old-growth forests in Europe. To the base of the world's tallest trees and the edge of vanishing glaciers, to a vast field of ancient volcanoes in the southwest and a volcanic exclusion zone in the Caribbean. Exploring these topics more deeply definitely hasn't made me any less worried, but it has helped me begin to better understand where I might fit as someone who shares stories and images. So that's what I want to do here: share my favorite stories and images from the past year. Just moments. Moments of feeling small, moments of adventure, moments that taught me new things and changed the way I see landscapes. And most importantly, moments that made me feel hopeful. The Olympic Peninsula is probably my favorite place on Earth. I say that about a few places, but I really mean it about this one. I was here at the very beginning of the year to tell a story about noise pollution. The old-growth rainforests in the peninsula's interior are some of the quietest places in the lower 48, but training flights from a naval base nearby have been changing that. Hiking through the forest, the sound of a fighter jet overhead is common and impossible to miss. As disruptive as the jets are, this forest hides pockets of silence, remote sections where in the gaps between flights, no other noise pollution is present. A month later, I was a bit further south in a different old-growth temperate rainforest, the coast redwoods. This forest hides the world's tallest tree, and that's what I was here to cover, but there was a bit of a twist. The day we arrived was also the first day of this historic blizzard on the west coast. The redwoods average an inch or two of snow each year, and it's safe to say we exceeded that. As a filmmaker, capturing footage of redwoods buried in a foot of snow was incredible. I didn't think scenes like this were possible. These images only existed in my head. Occasionally, branches weighed down by snow would break free and fall. This was when I started to realize that the sheer size of these trees can be not just incredibly beautiful, but a little dangerous. The timing of this trip and the whole experience is so special and beautiful in hindsight, but I was also a bit antsy. Antsy about getting squished by a falling branch or tree, but also seeing freak storms like this happen with increasing frequency in the future. I did not see any snow on the Portuguese island of Madeira. This is an interesting place. It's a fascinating example of people finding a way to live somewhere in spite of the land. Despite extensive cultivation, Madeira hides one of the last old-growth forests in Europe. This pocket of scraggly trees is a remnant of the Laurisilva forest that blanketed much of this region before European arrival, home to 600-year-old trees and countless endemic species. The island also takes a unique place in colonial history as basically the first place that the Portuguese landed and colonized on their way across the Atlantic. It's a place whose history foreshadows centuries of history to follow. And despite being a previously uninhabited island without indigenous inhabitants, it's a place that seems to be continually fighting back against its own settlement, slowly crumbling, growing over, and eroding any attempts to live there, and preserving little pockets of what it used to be. A month later, I was in a similar place, hiking into a rare pocket of old-growth forest in a region that was almost entirely logged centuries earlier, this time close to home. I had a big trip coming up in June, so in May I wanted to stay home and do something easy, something I already understood. So I opted to make a video about the mountains in my backyard, and it turns out I didn't understand them at all. Compared to the scenery out west, I've always kind of accepted that the East Coast is just worse. This project made me see things differently. I've always wished our mountains were taller and pointier, but never realized that these are the eroded remains of some of the oldest mountains on Earth. That's why they're shorter. I've always been frustrated when our deciduous forests turn all dead and brown in the winter, but never appreciated that this is one of the most biodiverse temperate forest ecosystems on the planet. Ironically, growing up with these mountains has allowed me to remain ignorant to their beauty for much of my life, but now I'm making an effort to counter that. These aren't hills, they're mountains. But still, there's one thing they definitely don't have. From a distance, a glacier is just a huge chunk of ice. And to me, that's what they've always been. This trip was different because it was my first time getting close, standing next to glaciers, walking on top of them, and realizing that these are not just big chunks of ice, but complex landscapes of peaks, valleys, canyons, rivers, and lakes. And beyond that, a landscape that is constantly changing, moving, folding, collapsing, melting, and shrinking. Much of this trip was spent face-to-face with climate change and its effects, standing in places that used to be buried in ice and sweating on snow 10,000 feet above sea level. After traversing the glacier and scrambling up a neighboring peak, we arrived at our hut for the night. These alpine huts are all over the Alps, providing climbers and mountaineers with beds, food, coffee, power. It almost feels like cheating. At this particular location, the mountaineering season was over and the climbing season hadn't started, so we had the place to ourselves, which was pretty sick. The hut had this beautiful balcony overlooking some of the most impressive peaks and glaciers in the Alps. We spent some time out here after it got dark, listening to the sound of rockfalls and avalanches echoing through the valley every few minutes, events that are becoming more frequent as the ice melts and the mountains become less stable. But despite the subject matter, this trip was also just a wonderful adventure. Learning about an entirely new way of exploring the mountains, seeing some of the most incredible landscapes, and pushing the edge of what I'm comfortable doing. I came home psyched about glaciers and very quickly threw together 2 trips to a familiar place to see more: the American Alps, Washington's North Cascades. I came here to make a video about glaciers that didn't talk about climate change, focusing instead on the function of glaciers within an ecosystem, a region, or a planet. I landed on a simple metaphor. You've heard forests described as the lungs of the earth. Glaciers are the heart. It's corny, but I really believe it. So much of what needs to, well, circulate the planet begins with ice. Freshwater, cold water, nutrients that support lakes, rivers, forests, oceans, and many of our largest cities. Not to mention an immense scientific and cultural value. I had seen this incredible image online of a massive amphitheater surrounded by towering peaks and glaciers, melting in the summer with hundreds of massive waterfalls cascading down the cliffs and forming the start of the area's largest river. Information online was pretty limited, but we tracked the spot down and set off early the next morning. There's no trail to get here. You just follow the riverbed, crossing the glacial water when necessary. We hit a strip mall the night before to pick up 2 pairs of off-brand Crocs, which honestly made a world of a difference. And eventually, we made it. This place was the missing piece to really understanding why the ice is so important. After a week of watching this river turn into forests, farms, cities, and eventually the Pacific Ocean, To now stand here with my feet in the water and watch the glaciers create the river itself, it was special. I spent most of the summer obsessing over glaciers and glacial landscapes, and I chose to make this video in the North Cascades because they're the most glaciated mountains in the lower 48. But there's something else about the Cascades that I really like. Something that's excited me for years, but really became an obsession the last few months of the year. I could easily make videos only about volcanoes. They're beautiful landscapes, they're living laboratories for groundbreaking research, and they're the closest thing the natural world has to a Lovecraftian monster. Everything about them is fascinating. Toward the start of the year, I saw a photo of a cinder cone volcano in the desert of Utah. It looked like the volcanoes I had climbed up in Iceland, but it was in the desert of Utah, which didn't make any sense. I was truly convinced that it was photoshopped. But it wasn't. Turns out there are volcanoes all over the Southwest. Learning that eventually led me to a volcanic field in Arizona with more than 600 cinder cones, an extinct stratovolcano, and a meteor crater. They've been the stage for weird cosmic experiments and art installations, and they present some fun geological and archaeological mysteries. Normally, you would expect volcanoes to form near tectonic plate boundaries, but these are nowhere near one. So why are they here? Well, scientists aren't completely sure. That ended up being my angle for this project, exploring the strangeness and mystery of this landscape. Breaking scientific ground and better understanding the world around us is really cool, but there's also something uniquely beautiful about not quite understanding something. I finished the year by visiting a volcano with a lot more going on. The Soufriere Hills on the Caribbean island of Montserrat, which erupted just 28 years ago. 2/3 of the island's population was forced to leave, and today much of the island is an exclusion zone where the human impact of volcanic eruptions is starkly observable. This is definitely the most active volcano I've seen, with a gaping crater and unstable lava domes steaming with hundreds of fumaroles, and still drastically affecting the way of life for the people living nearby. I'd heard a lot about this volcano. Its eruption was heavily documented, and it's since become one of the most extensively studied volcanoes on Earth. A quick Google search tells that story. A once beautiful Caribbean island, now an abandoned wasteland, with a big scary volcano and some cool science. And that was what got me in the door initially. But there was so much more here, just outside the spotlight of the volcano. Lush, biodiverse jungles, beautiful black sand beaches, quaint towns tucked into the mountains, and a fascinating colonial and archaeological history. This trip was a great reminder of the risk of simplifying locations by picking out their most dramatic stories. In this case, the most dramatic story is one of destruction and abandonment, rather than the equally prominent story of beauty and resilience. Montserrat provides a completely unique look at the complex relationship between this planet and the people living on it, and it's a place that will be on my mind quite a lot as I work to tell more stories about that relationship. For what it's worth, I had no intention of perfectly dividing my work this year into forests, glaciers, and volcanoes. And I have no intention of just showing you a bunch of pretty footage to pretend I spent the entire year in the mountains having fun adventures. Way more time was spent here in my little home office writing and editing these videos. And a good chunk of that time was spent looking at old stuff, archival maps, documents, newspapers, illustrations, photographs, and footage. Many of these images depict places that no longer exist, at least not in the same way. Some have just aged really poorly. But they all provide a window to a moment, from a faraway place, from another era, or from someone else's life. For centuries, images have been a way to understand history and science, to appreciate and remember our most spectacular landscapes, to document our failures, and to advocate for a better future. I said at the start that this video was about sharing moments, but I can't really do that. I can only tell you the stories and show you the images, in hopes that they encourage you to go out and find a moment of your own, that they get you excited for your next adventure out, and maybe, if I'm really lucky, for someone, that adventure will be their first. The first of many days spent appreciating and caring for the special places all around us. That's really all I can hope for. So I hope this video motivates you to listen closely and seek out quiet, to seek the presence of things larger than yourself, to find small pockets of unique beauty, to appreciate the landscapes in your own backyard, to get close to the things you've been reading about or seeing from afar, to take a look under the hood at how the world around us works, to see the beauty in what we don't yet understand, and to learn from the people living within the planet's most dynamic landscapes. Reducing deforestation, slowing climate change, and protecting people from natural disasters are tasks so huge and complex that they can seem completely impossible. But I think if more people have the chance to listen to an old-growth forest, or look into a glacier, or climb a volcano, it'll get a lot easier. And that's why I'm excited to keep doing this. I'm excited to spend another year sharing more images and experiencing more wonderful moments in special places. And I hope you'll join me for both.